Miss James, and today we are going to work together to continue building those reading skills as we practice our close reading strategies. Now, last time we were together, we went ahead and we talked about what it means to close read. So close reading is not just rereading the text, but it is actually reading the text to make sure that we understand. There is no purpose in reading if we do not understand what the text is saying. So we talked about some pre-reading things we can do, like closely examining the text, looking at our text features. We talked about some things we can do during reading, like thinking about our main idea, thinking about supporting details, and explaining the text as we read. When we explain that text, we're really thinking about the key elements of the story, of the article, and we are making sure that we are synthesizing or putting together the information so that we deeply understand the text. One of the big things as we were talking about close reading and as we were talking about pre-reading our text is making sure that we know what type or genre the text is. So when we know the type or genre of the text, then we can understand how to approach it as we are reading. Reading a fiction text and reading a nonfiction text, we know fiction is fake, right? When I'm reading a story or a made-up text, I'm not gonna read it the same way I would read a real text that has real facts, real life things in it, something that is nonfiction. I'm gonna approach those things and think about those things two very different ways. So I want to help you guys to make sure that you know some strategies you can use as you're reading fiction versus nonfiction. Let's get into it. So as we have already stated, right, our fiction text is a fake text or it is made up, right? We want to make sure that we know how to identify these things so that as we are reading, we can know what we're looking for and what we're thinking about. So how do I know when a text is fiction? One, fiction texts typically have shorter paragraphs. Usually, fiction text has a lot of dialogue. And us narrative writers, people who write fiction, who write stories, we know that whenever a new character is speaking, whenever a new character does action, we have to create new paragraphs. This results in fiction text having lots of really short paragraphs or paragraphs where we see a lot of dialogue. So fiction text typically has those shorter paragraphs within it. We also know, y'all almost dropped my iPad, but we also know that fiction text has a lot of dialogue. It has a lot of imagery inside of the text. So there's a lot of imagery and dialogue there. Fiction text also typically tells a story, and then it has our narrative elements. So character, setting, plot, theme are all inside of a fiction text. So when we're reading fiction, here we're getting to the juice, right? When we're reading fiction, we want to think about the main idea. Main idea is what the text is mostly about. We know that when we're reading fiction, when we're reading nonfiction, the definition of main idea stays the same. It is what the text is mostly about. So in fiction, the main idea is the character. So I'm thinking main character plus the plot. And when we're talking about plot, we're not talking about all the events that happen in the story, but what is like the story mostly about? Remember, main idea does not have all the little details, but it has, I'm not gonna say, if you ask me what I did over the weekend, I'm not gonna say, oh, it was 6:30 a.m. I slowly opened my eyes. I lifted from the arch of my back and I read. I'm not telling you all of that. When you ask me what I did over the weekend, I'm just going to say I went to the movies. I went to the mall. I'm giving you the highlights, the big thing. That's the same thing when we're talking about main idea. When we are describing the plot and our main idea, it's going to be something quick and to the point. Not Miss James woke up out of bed, brushed her teeth, got in the shower, did her hair. Like, we're not talking about all of those things. We're going to say, Miss James went to the movies. Who's the character? Miss James. What is happening? What's the plot? She went to the movies, okay? So that's what we're thinking about as we're reading fiction text. I'm sorry, y'all. As we're reading a fiction text, we're going to be thinking about who are the characters, and really who's the main character, and then what is happening, okay? We know our characters are who and what, or who, maybe we shouldn't say and, maybe we should say who or what is doing the action, okay? And we say who or what because sometimes in a text, it could be a person. Sometimes if there's a talking tree in the text and the text is talking and it is having a role in the story, then it could be a tree, or it could be a monkey, or it could be a teacup, like in Beauty and the Beast. Is that Beauty and the Beast where it's a teacup, or is that Snow White? I don't know, but there could be anything that does action in a story is going to be a character, okay? Then we want to think about the setting. The setting is when. Do not forget the when. A lot of times we think about where when we're talking about a story, or when we're talking about setting. But in a story, if I have a story that takes place at night rather than a story that takes place in the day, that's going to affect my text. So when the story happens, just like if I have a story that takes place in 1996 versus a story that takes place in 2023, when the story takes place is very, very important and can influence our characters a lot, okay? So when and where the story takes place, okay? Then we have our plot. Our plot is the action inside of the text. These are the events that are happening. So this is our beginning, middle, and end. This is our problem and solution. So as we are thinking about our fiction text, we want to think about the plot. This is going to be like mostly what we're thinking about as we're reading the text, right? What is happening? What's going on? I'm constantly asking myself these questions because reading is thinking. I am not going to just read a text and I don't understand what's happening, or I don't know what my characters are doing, or I don't know what's happening or going on. I have to ask myself these questions. I have to stop and think as I am reading. Lastly, when we are reading fiction, we want to think about the theme. The theme is the lesson from the text. It's the lesson or the message. What can I learn from the story? What is something that I can take from this text and apply it to my life no matter who I am? The theme is not something like Miss James went to the movies, but maybe when I went to the movies, I got to take some time away from work to relax. So maybe the theme of the story, so the main idea is Miss James went to the movies, but the theme of the text would be it's good to spend some time doing things that you like, or taking care of yourself is important, or doing fun things are important. It's important to relax. Those are all themes. Those are things that anybody can listen to and apply to their lives, okay? So that is our fiction text. Really quickly, before we talk about nonfiction, I do want to show you guys a fiction text. So let's go over to an example text really quickly. So here's an example of a fiction text that we could encounter. And as I am looking at this text, I'm taking some time to notice some of the things that we talked about. Like we talked about how fiction text has shorter paragraphs. It has a lot of dialogue. It tells a story. So when we're looking at this text, one thing that I'm noticing already is those really short paragraphs. And I also see that inside of those paragraphs, our characters are talking. I also see some character names here. Now, names can be in nonfiction text, but I know typically in a nonfiction text that when they say the name of the person, because it is real, and we want to be able to identify like who that real person is, they typically give the first and last name. Like this one says Mary. There could be millions of Marys in the world, where if this was a nonfiction text and it says Mary James, right? Then we know that specific Mary that they're talking about, because that's important, because Mary's a real person in that nonfiction text. Here, I just see this character's name, and it doesn't say her last name too. So that kind of makes me feel fiction with this text as well. And when I'm not reading the whole thing, y'all. I'm just skimming through because this is a part of our pre-reading process, right? It says, Mary went into the garden as quickly as possible. Wait, so this is kind of telling me what's going on. It's giving me some imagery. I'm able to see her moving quickly into the garden. So I'm already thinking like, okay, so I see some character names. I see some really short paragraphs that include dialogue. I see some imagery. This, just by looking at the first page of this text, is clearly fiction. So when I'm thinking about reading this text already, The Secret Garden, that's our title. We always look at our title first, no matter if it's fiction or nonfiction, right? We're thinking about the title. And I know as I read The Secret Garden, because it is a fiction text, I already know I'm thinking about character, setting, plot, and theme. When I am reading, I am thinking about these things. I am not going to wait till I get to the end of the text. I'm not going to wait till I get to a question that asks me about these things, but I'm actually going to go ahead and start to think about these things as I am reading. So as I am reading, I'm going to think about who are the characters. I already know a character name. One of the characters' names is Mary. We just looked at that by looking at the first sentence, right? So I'm thinking and I'm asking myself, what are some character traits that describe Mary? How does Mary act in the story? What is Mary's role in the story? Is she the main character? Is she a character that supports the main character? Is she more of a secondary character? Is she flat? Is she round? Is she doing things that I can connect to that maybe I've done before in my life? Where is the story taking place? What's going on? And what can I learn from it? And y'all, I just want to point this out, right? Because as I look at the text, and I look at the questions that go with the text, like one of the questions, right? So if I'm thinking about character as I'm reading, one of these questions says, how are Mary and Ben different? If I'm already thinking about character, this question is not going to be difficult for me. I've already started to thinking about my main character, Mary, and how she, I keep trying to drop my iPad. This is not cool. But I'm already thinking about my main character, Mary. I'm already thinking about how she acts, how she responds, things that she does. So I am not super surprised when I see this question, and I'm not like having to think as hard, because as I was reading, I did a lot of my hard thinking, and I spent some time annotating and taking notes as I was reading about character, setting, plot, theme, all of those things. So I see a question that clearly asks us about the characters. A question here that says, which detail should or which details should be included in a summary of the selection. If I've been thinking about, because I know fiction summaries include my main idea, my beginning, middle, end, and then I'm wrapping it up thinking about my theme, right? So if I am already thinking about these events, the important things that are going on in the story, if I'm already thinking about plot, then this question is not going to surprise me. This question is going to continue to make me put together the things that I've already been thinking about as I'm reading. When you think about these things as you are reading, it is not hard for us to tackle these questions because sometimes these questions can be challenging. And so making sure that we are taking away that big, heavy lifting and making it easier for ourselves. It is always better to work smarter and not harder. So instead of me reading the whole fiction text and having to go back and having to try to figure these things out after I've read the whole thing, I'm gonna spend some time taking notes on character, on setting, on plot, on theme. And when I get to these questions, I already have a deep understanding of what it is that I need to accomplish. Y'all, I hope this was helpful as you were reading and thinking about reading fiction text. Next time we are together, we are gonna talk about reading nonfiction text, y'all, and some steps and some things that we can take as we are reading nonfiction text to make that easier for us as well. Y'all, I hope this video was helpful. If there is any questions that you have, you can comment down below. Call me, beat me. If you want to reach me, your girl is out. Bye.